Hello everyone. I know I have not been shooting a lot of kitchen videos lately. Gets a little complicated figuring out when nobody else is going to be in the kitchen sometimes. So had access today and was realizing based on the topic that we were doing this month, which is kind of alternative foods, what to eat when you have sensitivities to common things, one of which is dairy. That I had not done one on making coconut yogurt, which is something that I do on a regular basis. Pretty much make a batch every couple of weeks. I use a Euro cuisine, I guess, thermos thing, and it normally has 7 jars, this size, which I think are 6 or 8 ounces, something like that. And one of mine is broken, so we have a baby food jar in here to fill in the difference. But anyway, to start off with, I start with regular, coconut milk. So I personally use So Delicious coconut milk, unsweetened. Sure it is. And then I'm filling this based on how much will go into my yogurt maker to about 26 ounces on this measuring. I'm a hair short, it looks like. Just check and see if I have some more. Particularly, so I'll probably make this batch a little light. In addition to this coconut milk, I will also be using a can of coconut cream in this as well. But the first thing I do is measure it, put it into a pan. I prefer a fairly wide pan so that it will have a fair amount of contact with the burner on the bottom. Heat up a little faster that way. And just set this aside, you use it later. But the first thing you want to do is add some gelatin to it. The difference between when you're working with actual dairy and when you're working with a substitute like coconut milk is that they don't congeal the way your yogurt normally does when it's made with dairy. So you have to do something, gelatin, pectin, guar, agar-agar, when I was trying to remember, kind of for solidifying. I found gelatin to be the easiest. Now I'm just sprinkling this on the top a little bit at a time on the top of the coconut milk, cold. It seems to mix in better, absorb better when it's cold. I tried the other way. This works better. So I don't even have this on the burner heating up. It will be heated up once I get all of this in here, but I give it some time for the gelatin to rehydrate and just kind of sprinkling it around. If you get too much in one spot, it's more likely to end up with a chunk. The more you can spread it around, and it will start rehydrating. But I let that actually sit for a few minutes. I'm just using some powdered beef gelatin picked up at Natural Grocers. I've also used the Great Lakes brand gelatin as well. And I have a thermometer I'm using. I am not putting it in yet because we're not starting to heat it yet. So it's easier to stir when I don't have it in there. But I'm just letting that sit. It's starting to, rehydrate the powder on that. If you get a yogurt making thermometer, it is actually got a green mark up here that is the range in which it needs to be in order for the yogurt to incubate. And so that's the temperature. Basically, at the top end of that is where you want to get it to on the stove once we actually start heating it up before we put it in the yogurt maker. But first step, get the gelatin rehydrated. And the next thing I add in is some of the coconut cream. So I'm going to go open the can just a sec. I think we need a new blade on our coconut, our can opener. It's not coming off as well as it could. But let's see if I can get this where you can see it sort of. It's all just kind of masked. There's nothing dry still. It's kind of in chunks at this point. So I'm going to now, it's kind of sinking down to the bottom. And most of this is going to be solid, but there will probably be some liquid at the bottom, which means you do not want to just shove something down into it, and you want to do this gently. Because if you cause this to get pushed down in there, you're going to get getting squirted liquid out of the bottom of the can. This is especially true if you're using canned coconut milk that's not just cream. This is mostly the solid, so you have less of that happening than you would on regular coconut milk. But this is fairly solid. This is actually, yes, it just squirted a little bit to get the liquid out here at the bottom. And, okay, pretty well. Right now, you've got chunks. Fortunately, the camera angle does not lend itself to being able to, get chunks of coconut cream in here, so. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put the thermometer in this and get it going over here on the stove. Trying to get some of the coconut cream actually into the pan instead of all over the spatula here. Okay, so I'm going to get this kind of just down in, but not all the way on the bottom, because that will just give you an inaccurate measurement. And I'm not going to put it on high, because that's more likely to heat it too hot too fast, and then I'm not going to, you know, it's like, didn't need it that hot. And then you have to either wait a long time for it to cool back down into that green range, because you don't want to put it in unless you're like right above, right at the top edge. That's kind of the ideal time to put that in. Yogurt maker is designed to kind of keep it at that temperature, but you don't want to put it in if it's, you know, above that, because the next stage we're going to do is pour it back into this container with some yogurt to culture it. I have done just using probiotics. I have done some grains, you know, culture grains. The problem I had with the dairy-free culture grains that I gotten was you need to use a new one each time you make it. You can't, normally with yogurt, you keep a little bit back of your previous batch, use that to culture the next batch, and you just keep doing that, and you don't have to, you know, invest in the yogurt grains market every time you're actually needing to make a batch. So I have been actually using some, I started with some, about a tablespoon or two of the So Delicious yogurt, unsweetened, and I find I like it a little firmer than that, and there's, you know, other things in it. I don't necessarily, and it's expensive. Yeah, is why I don't just use that all the time. I kind of like what I make myself. So anyway, the first time lately that I had done it, I did use, you know, some of that, and then the last couple of times I've made it, I've actually kept back a couple tablespoons from what was already made. You can see that it wiggles, has some thickness to it, looks, you know, fairly yogurt-like. You will not see it at the end because that is going to be like 6 hours from now. And it won't look like this until it's chilled. So the next thing we're doing is we're adding this into the pitcher. I'm going to take my spatula, break it up a little bit, because we don't want it in big chunks. We want it to actually mix in when I pour the hot stuff from the stove in it. Okay, anyway, so I just got this in the bottom, and because I had set that aside from using the last of the yogurt this morning. So you get it to the right temperature, you put it in that, you then pour it into the yogurt maker, which I will show more of when we actually get to that point here. After I make the yogurt, put the yogurt in, then it's culturing. Then I'm going to put the lid on it, set it. I personally have been doing it for about 6 hours. You can do longer than that. Part of it varies, you know, just on how tart it will get. You know, the longer you leave it, the tartar it will get. And when it beeps, which sometimes I set a timer as well, because the beep on this thing isn't necessarily loud enough if you have the TV on to hear it. So I have left some longer than it should have been at times. So I will set a timer for 6 hours in addition to that. And then at that point, I mix it up, because at that point it is separate. It's still hot. It is separated. There's more, clear liquid at the bottom, white on the top. I mix it together, put a lid on it, put it immediately in the refrigerator. And then after it's like gone overnight, it's all set up. It's ready to eat. But it does have to culture, and then it has to set up in the refrigerator before it's actually ready. And so you won't see those last two parts of the process because that's a little more time consuming, and I want to actually post this video sometime. So anyway, so we're heating over here. Let me just check. Looks like we're running at around 80 degrees at this point, and I need it to be up at about 115 maybe at the most. And so you do lose a little bit of heat as you're pouring it into the pitcher. So if it's just a hair over the green, fine. But basically, I think it's probably about 105 to 110 Fahrenheit is the range that's in the green on this yogurt making thermometer. So I'm letting that heat. I will explain something else in the meantime while we're waiting. Another thing you can do for non-dairy is to use some of this coconut cream or some other brand of coconut cream, and you can make a soft cheese, kind of cream cheese out of it. I've actually used this cheese to substitute for cream cheese in a cheesecake recipe. It works. Besides just using it as a soft cheese, I've done batches where it was just half this can. I've done batches, where it was the whole thing. Depending on how fast you're using it, I found I kind of liked doing half of it. Was easier to use up quickly. Demonstrate here for a second how I do that. I do not have any coffee filters, which is why I'm not actually fully demonstrating this right at this moment. But what you do is you put an unbleached coffee filter inside of a strainer, a mesh strainer, and then you stick the mesh strainer over the top of a bowl. So you've got something to collect the liquid that's going to drain off. The idea of this is you're trying to get it as solid as possible, get as much liquid drained off. Before putting the coconut cream into the top, you add about a tablespoon of lemon juice, and then you cover this. Put like a paper towel or something just to make sure you don't have any flybys. And set this aside for like 36 hours. And at that point, you can either let it go a little longer, you can taste it, see if it tastes tart enough to you. That's kind of the culturing process. It's the lemon juice and sitting out for extended period of time. All you do at that point, put it into a glass container, stick it in your fridge, and then use it like you would use cream cheese. So that's another thing that you can do. Let me check and see what's happening over here on the stove. We are actually getting pretty close. So I have used this multiple times. You can also, which I don't have everything to demonstrate here, you can also make a slightly harder anyway, cheese where you heat it up, add agar-agar powder to it. Some people add a little nutritional yeast to give it a little more yeasty taste, to make it a little more cheese tasting like. But that will give you, something that's a little more solid that you can kind of, cut. It doesn't necessarily grate. It's not quite that hard. It's a little hard to grate things that are soft, unfortunately. But you can cut it up after it's set up in the fridge, just like this has to. You can, kind of cut it in cubes to kind of help it break it up, and it will melt. But that is one thing. Obviously, doing all these, can be a little time consuming. The main thing I do all the time is the yogurt. But other things I don't always do. Okay, we're actually up to 120, so we're plenty hot. It needs to cool down just a bit. Put these two things back away. But there are many uses for your coconut cream. Yeah, let me see if I can reposition this for. Just trying to reposition this a little bit. Let me point it down so we can actually see what I'm doing a little. Let's try it down a little bit farther here. My water bottle. So see better what I'm doing with the yogurt maker. Now everything is in a circle here, just in a circle with one in the center. And when you're pouring these in, you want to start from you're the farthest, hardest to reach first, and then you have to be careful to not drip too much, so you're not making a big mess inside of here. So usually you're trying to, kind of stop, get the drip off a little bit before you go to the next one, or do it quickly before it starts dripping. So anyway, I wanted you to see kind of what the yogurt thing. There's a dial here that shows you, okay, how long are you setting this for? How many hours? And then there's a button over here that you push when you're actually starting. So that's how this particular yogurt maker works. Obviously, there's many kinds. So let me check and see if the coconut milk is cooled down enough. A little hot still. Going to stir it up a little bit. Make sure everything's blended. As it is right now, you really aren't seeing the gelatin. It's all just one, white mixture. And I'm just checking and seeing what the temperatures. For some reason, with this particular thermometer, when you agitate it, it temporarily reads higher. Don't ask me why. Okay, so now I'm going to pour it in. Now, the yogurt's already in the bottom. It's being the culture. And the act of pouring is basically mixing it and circulating it through. So I'm not really trying to stir it. And get rid of the pan. Okay, so then I tend to start at the back and work my way forward. And depending how much coconut milk I had is going to depend on how much there is in here. I was a little short, so I'm not going to try to top these babies off. Okay, it's actually doing pretty well here. I've got a little bit left, so I'm going to top some of the shorter ones. I'm going to add a little more too. Try to equalize how much I've got going on here. Trying to be a little drippy there. Okay, so I'm going to clean off the edge there. Now, when lift this up a little bit so you can sort of see me. Everything's open at this point. I've got all the lids just set to the side here. At this point, you just take the big lid and you set it over the top. And you push the button and it's set to go for 6 hours. It will steam up, create condensation inside of this lid. You don't want to jostle it because that will cause the condensation to drip into the yogurt. So you want to kind of leave it as still as possible while it's culturing. And when you go to take it off, there will be a bunch of liquid in the lid and around the little lip down below. So you kind of lift it carefully up and then just kind of flip it real fast to keep it from dripping as much as possible. So anyway, the next thing I will be doing with this is 6 hours from now. I will stir these up, get it mixed back together after it's separated, the kind of liquids from the solids and the coconut milk. Stir them up, put the lid on, stick it in the fridge, and then I will, at that point, let it chill for like overnight and be ready to eat it up tomorrow morning if I wanted to. So anyway, that's a little bit on how to make some cream cheese and on how to make your own coconut yogurt. So if you have any questions, post it in the comment below. A lot of the measurements, it's going to depend on the size of your yogurt maker. For this yogurt maker, I usually use a little under 26 ounces of that coconut milk, a 14-ounce can of coconut cream, 2 tablespoons of the gelatin, and about 1 to 2 tablespoons of yogurt that I'm reusing that's getting put into there. So that's actually all of the elements right there. And how much you would need is going to depend on, you know, kind of your yogurt making setup, how many ounces you're actually dealing with, because it's going to vary depending on the size of the amount you're wanting to make up. So anyway, that should be everything as far as I can remember. If you think of something I missed, let me know and ask it in the comments, and I will, get back to you on any particular details that I may have missed or accidentally left out. So anyway, let me go ahead and stop the recording. All right, bye-bye.